Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of D&D CR Exposed. Today we are looking at the Arch-Hag from the Monster Manual 2025 edition. As you'll be able to follow along here on the right side, I have another way of looking at the monster stats without showing any artwork. So don't ask me where this comes from because I'm not telling, but if you know, you know. Before we get into this, if you'd also like to use this tool for yourself, you can go ahead and grab your copy of my tool at my Ko-fi page and link in the description, where you can get it completely for free or donate if you feel so inclined to. My Ko-fi page has a bunch of other things I have up for offer, like a bunch of custom classes, subclasses, monsters, and a bunch of other items there. So take a look, support the channel. You can also support the channel by either becoming a YouTube member or a Ko-fi supporter. Either way will get you your name in the credits as well as early access to all these videos like this one right now. So if you're a member, you're seeing this immediately when I post it. Otherwise, it comes out at some point down the road. Alright, now that the business is out of the way, let's take a look at this request from a commenter on my last 2025 video, or no, not my last video, but for my post asking for new Monster Manual monsters. So the first one that came through was the Arch-Hag, who is a CR 21 monster. And we're just going to be looking at the monster alone without the lair stuff because, whatever. I only care about the monster, not necessarily about what they're like in the lair. And this will be a monster by themselves without the coven as well. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and start throwing some information in here. We are looking for a CR 21 with the total of 20 AC here. So up in the top left, we're going to start from our top and work our way down. This is a large Fae, which is surprising. I wasn't expecting the Arch-Hag to be large, but okay, whatever. And then from there, we are looking next at the hit points, and the hit points are going to be 29 D10, which will give us 159 at first, and then our hit points will be modified in a little bit here. Which now we are going to look at 24 strength, 15 dex, 23 con, 19 intelligence, 19 wisdom, and 25 charisma. So we are now getting 333 average hit points, just like we are seeing up here in the top right. Next up, we are moving down the line here. We are going to look at our skills, resistances, immunities, and so on. We do have 3 resistances for cold, fire, and psychic. We're going to go ahead and put that in, but because the monster is already over CR 15, this is not going to make any difference to our monster. So in the case that they do get hit with cold, fire, or psychic damage, they'll take a little bit less damage, but more than likely players will work around that. So anyways, regardless, we'll go ahead and throw that in, and as you see here in my traits, my cumulative bonuses, we are getting no bonus for being such a high CR and having these bits of damage resistances. Next up, we will move into the traits. We have Coven Magic. Again, I'm not looking at the Coven Magic. On top of that, it's a bunch of just basic spells that aren't really going to impact combat, so we will skip over that. We do have Legendary Resistances, though, for 4 or 5 in the lair, which is interesting to see that they actually have a higher amount here. So we will go ahead and throw in 4 because we are just looking at the Hag alone. On top of that, we also have Magic Resistance, which is a very common item to have along with Legendary Resistances. After that, we have Spiteful Escape. When a Hag drops to 0 hit points, it dies only if it is within 30 feet of its anathema. Otherwise, it drops to 1 hit point, teleports to a harmless demi-plane, and can't return for so many days. Until the curse ends, a creature has disadvantage on ability checks. Let's see. When it teleports away, each creature within 60 feet of it is cursed, which is interesting, but because that ends the encounter, more than likely anyways, we will skip over this Spiteful Escape, which is a neat addition to let the Hag kind of get the last laugh here. Moving on, we will now look at the actions, and we will see that we have 2 Spectral Claw attacks and uses Cackling Wave. So our Spectral Claw is a 14 to hit, as well as our Crackling Wave with a DC 22, so likely we are either using Strength or Charisma for either of these. It doesn't really matter, as long as we have the right numbers in here. Since we are using 2 Spectral Claws and a Crackling Wave, we could average this out, but I mean, it's kind of tricky. I mean, unless we look here, let's see. We're looking at attack bonus of a 15, and that should be DC 24 roughly, and a DC 22 is working out to be a 13. So we could say, you know, with two of them being a 15 and one being technically a 13 for the attack bonus wise, converting from a 22 to 13, this is going to technically work out to be a 15 anyways if we round up. So I'm just going to leave the attack bonus at a 15. Now with Spectral Claws, we do get 3d6 plus 7 force damage here, so that's going to be 17.5, because for every odd number of dice we have to add in a half die. And then if the target is large or smaller, it becomes prone if the attack hits. So we're doing 2 of those plus the Spectral Wave. Now let's take a look at the Spectral Wave here. Each creature in a 60-foot cone is dealt lightning damage, 32. Success on half, failure, let's see here. Success, half damage, failure, or success. The target is cursed until the end of the hag's next turn. The target can't take reactions until the curse ends. Interesting. I don't really know how to quantify that into the CR. Likely it doesn't really do much besides stop attacks of opportunity. And that was the failure. So, oh, cute. They have a way of doing like, okay, we have our failure, we have our success, and either way, the target is cursed. So for our wave, we're going to do 32 times 2, because in 5th edition, we are looking at expecting targets to fail, and at most we would expect 2 failures, or 1 failure, 2 passes, or 4 passes, 4 successes and whatnot. So the easiest route is just to take the average number, multiply it times 2, and that's what you get for your crackling wave when it comes to AoEs like this, areas of effect. So in terms of our multi-attack, we are doing this times 2 and adding in the AoE for a total of 99 damage every round of combat. Now as for the spell casting, we have Detect Thoughts, Dimension Door, Escape Mechanism, Dispel Magic, which could be handy, Hypnotic Pattern, which knocks characters out, Mass Suggestion, Modify Memory, and Plane Shift. So these are all basically defensive spells. And what I'd like to do here is take a page from Tales of the Valiant and suggest that whenever we are using anything defensive, we just replace that with a 0 offensively, because that's basically how it balances out. So I'm not going to bother looking at anything defensive and just see what the offensive capabilities are. Likely if you spend a turn using one of these that isn't part of maybe a legendary action, which I haven't quite looked at just yet, it would potentially work out to kind of even out more or less. So skipping over spell casting, we do have a bonus action of Witch Strike. Each creature cursed by the hag and within 60 feet of it takes 14 lightning damage. So in theory, we are going to suggest probably two creatures are going to be cursed at any given time. So we will go ahead and get this, because this is also an AoE, and that will be 14 times 2 for a total of 28. Now the bonus action here would be every round, so we will go ahead and just add that into the multi-attack combination, and now we're up to 127 points of damage. Next we have Tongue Twister. The hag casts Counterspell in response to that spell's trigger, using the same spellcasting ability as spellcasting. Okay, if the target fails its saving throw, it's cursed until the end of the next turn. Until that curse ends, the target can't cast spells with a verbal component. Okay, how do we deal with Counterspell? Because Counterspell is a level 3 abjuration spell. Let me see if I can bring that completely into view here. And level 3 conjuration, this would technically increase, but only if we have people casting spells, which is likely to have it, and it's only once per turn. It would probably increase the spells by ever so slightly. I'll take a look at this. If our numbers are kind of off, I'll add in the Tongue Twister for the counterspell, but so far probably isn't going to impact the CR all that much. Besides that, it is technically reducing damage, so it would increase our hit points, so on and so forth. In any event, let's take a look at the legendary actions. We'll come back to that if need be. So Hag Swipe. The hag makes 1 spectral claw attack. We can do that up to 3 times, otherwise 4 times in the lair. Like I said, I don't really care about the lair action for the time being. We'll you know, if you'd like to figure this out, you can follow my video here and then change it to add in all the items for layer stuff here. So we will have the swipe, and we're going to multiply that times 3 because we could use the Hag swipe 3 times in a row, giving us a total of 52.5 points of damage. And then on top of that, we have Malicious Magic. The Hag uses spellcasting to cast Dimension Door or Hypnotic Pattern. The Hag can't take this action again until the start of its next turn. So this this is nice to see that they're adding in this kind of limitations on legendary actions, so we just don't keep spamming Dimension Door or Hypnotic Pattern, and we're limited to once, and then the Hag has to go and use their other legendary actions. Now, as for Hypnotic Pattern, this is a level 3 illusion spell, defensive spell as well. This would also technically knock a player out of combat, but we don't necessarily have a way to deal with knocking players out of combat besides raising up the hit points. So first of all, let's go ahead and see what we get for just all offensive and go from there. So every round of combat, we would just be doing a whole bunch of attacks and just going from there. Now, normally you could go rounds 1, 2, and 3, but because everything would be the same every round of combat, doing the Cackling Wave and the Spectral Slices, I'm just going to use Concentration because that will throw it right into the full attacks. So we would get the multi-attack plus all 3 legendary actions, which puts us down to 179 total damage. Now, with everything that we have in place so far, not considering magic and not considering using malicious magic and what have you, we're looking at a CR 24. This is supposed to be a CR 21. Now, what do I normally suggest in these cases? Let's try removing all of the legendary actions. If we do that, we should have a 0, and that only reduces the damage or the overall CR to a 23 rather than a 24. So we are really over the top here. Now, more than likely, we are probably going to need some spellcasting, but the issue then is, what are we using? How often are we using it? And Dimension Door is at will. All right, so what is Dimension Door here? That is 200 feet straight downwards, or 300 feet at an angle, or something to that, upwards to the north, and so on. Let me see here. Let me pull that in just a wee bit. Oops. There we go. Okay. You teleport to a location within range. You arrive at exactly the spot desired. It can be at any place you can see. So range up to 500 feet. I do have something here that we could use. So let's take a look at that instead. We'll get rid of that. We'll restore the attacks of ×3. And then we will say Dimension Door once. So how much is Dimension Door if we do my little teleporting trick here? If we can teleport up to 500 feet away, that's pretty gnarly. Yeah. Let's see here. I don't even know which one to use that with, because that is just an excessive amount of range here. And that's a level 4, huh? Alright, so generally speaking, I would say at most let's try this one, because this is technically the same as a level 4 spell here, 120 feet. So we'll go ahead and add that in, and we'll say once per round we are doing this, giving us technically 68 effective hit points. We will then reduce the legendary actions to 2 rather than 3, and we will add that in instead to see if this changes anything, and we're still basically coming to a CR 24. So the only way to deal with this from this point on is to reduce the hit dice and reduce the damage, or maybe even the 2 hit. Like reducing the AC is an easy way, as well as the attack bonuses, to really bring this monster down a bit. Yeah, so what should we do? Honestly, the easiest thing is just to basically use this as a CR 24 monster rather than a 21. But at this level, where your players are so high level, it may not make a difference, to be honest. So, use at your own discretion. I'm finding a CR 24. The book says it's technically a CR 21. There may be some distinction, like some very different things going on here of what what D&D and the creators are expecting the monster to do every round. Maybe they have like an average of, okay, this is the best that the monster can do, what's the worst the monster can do, what's the average between those two, and maybe that's how they end up with a CR 21 instead. I might have to look at that at some point and maybe see if that's the case. But beyond that, here we are. You know, we have a CR 24 monster using average damage rather than maximum or minimum damage, because honestly, that would be the average. In any event, thank you all so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, check the links below for a whole bunch of other stuff that I have available, and I will see you in the next one.